So, Joe, quick question.
Mm.
And this is a question that a fellow entrepreneur has asked me from Reddit. How did you become better at sales and landing larger clients and accounts? Now, what would you tell this person? They're looking for bigger clients and to become better at sales just generally. What's your advice?
Right. So my first piece of advice comes from within. Now, I look at this from the internal and the external. So the internal is all about your belief systems and habits, and then your external comes down to actually putting the repetition in. So I'll answer the external first. Getting
Mm,
better at sales literally just comes down to repetition. Now, I've been in sales for the last 6 years. Every deal that I've closed within my agency, bar one, has been closed by me. And we've closed well over 500K worth of deals. Now,
mm,
the psychology of closing a deal that's worth £1,000 versus £10,000 versus £100,000 is exactly the same. We're trying to build a bridge to take people through a transformation. So we're speaking to people and we just want to move them from point A to point B. And we have to be the solution and bridge to be just that. So it's figuring out what is the thing that makes that person tick. Now, sales becomes easier the better you are at marketing. The better marketing you have, the easier the sell is. And sales largely just comes down to trust. Now, that's what we're trying to overcome. And the internal is where all of that happens. So it's your belief system.
mm,
So Alex Hormozy mentioned that in his gym, his sales guys, their best sales day was on Saturdays because that was the day that they would see the results of clients. So they would see the transformations of clients. And that helped their internal because that helped their belief system. So with their belief
mm,
system, they would then reaffirm themselves, they were affirming themselves. And at our peak as an agency, what we would do is every single morning we would drill down our numbers, we'd see what was working. Every week we would be going through and looking at our previous sales calls, basics you can do. Catch up with your team every single day. If you don't have a team, then mentally catch up with yourself. Go to a sheet, look over your numbers. Um, Practice in front of a mirror. It sounds so cliche, but ask reflective questions, ask rhetorical questions. Great
mm,
questions could be using your body language and saying, can I just ask you a direct question? Or
mm,
would you be against? And just changing your mannerisms. And I really believe I kind of have a different persona when I'm in sales calls. You have to psych yourself up to get into those sales calls. And above all else, you have to believe in what you're selling and believe in what you're saying to that person. So sales is just massively a transference of beliefs and your internal feelings. And I know when I'm going through, and everyone in sales does, when I'm going through rough patches, my beliefs are shaken. I remember, Erald,
mm,
you'll probably remember this was 2 years ago. I hadn't closed a deal for probably a good 4 or 5 weeks. And I felt really, really rough. And I remember I had a really good call with a guy, uh, verbally signed them up. He didn't sign in the end, which was fine. But just having that there, just having the confirmation from someone else, that's what helped. And I would much rather trust the person who has had 1,000 sales calls as opposed to the guy who's only had, or girl, 100 versus the person who's had one. I think sales isn't as theoretical as most people think.
mm.
Great books you can read. The Art of Closing the Sale by Brian Tracy, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. And there's tons of sales literature out there, and a lot of it just comes down to psychology. What tips do you have, Errol? Because I know you've closed some fantastic deals as time's gone on, and we'll go on to the point of signing higher value clients as well on that point.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think you've raised some really important ideas there that people should consider. The internal is definitely the one area that I think a lot of people would benefit from. And I think for me, it's just asking the right questions and asking better questions when it comes to those sales calls. So initially, people have this idea of like soft selling versus hard selling. So it's like, here's something I want to sell. Please buy it. Can you buy it? Whatever it is that they're trying to do. But that's generally not the way that people like to be sold to. In fact, uncovering the pain point and understanding how you can alleviate that pain point by offering a product or service is generally the way to get to someone's inner psyche when it comes to why they want to buy something. So if you're selling a service, let's say you're a football coach, and you're like, well, you're not selling football coaching. You're selling the ability to help someone get better at football, to improve their fitness, to help them get further in their footballing career, to help them, improve their life. If that's how you want to phrase it, you really have to phrase that pain point as something that you can help alleviate more than this is something that I'm trying to sell to you. Because no one wants to be sold to, but people do want to buy. So it's like, how can you bridge that gap, as you said, Joe, in a way that makes it easy, and then use your trust, your authority in the space to really get to that pain point, and then the sale becomes super easy. As you said, Joe, closing massive deals versus closing smaller deals is really no different, which also begs the question, are you talking to the right clients? Another thing that would help you with the sales process is picking better clients or picking better prospects. So when you're going through the vetting service, are you qualifying who you're speaking to? Can they realistically afford the service? If you're selling £100,000 logos, you're not really going to be able to sell that to a small bakery down the road, but you may be able to sell this to a large FTSE 500 company that needs a logo change. Think about who you're speaking to. As you said, Joe, get down into the psyche and then focus on fixing a problem, not selling something. What you're selling is a solution, but you're providing a solution, not particularly selling it in that respect. So that's what I'd say. And I think for the larger clients, aside from prospecting and finding bigger clients, what is another thing that you think this person should add to find those uh, larger deals, as they've quoted it?
Prospecting is arguably the number one thing. I think putting themselves in the right environment. So
Yeah.
there's multiple ways to grow a business and attract clients. Some of the best advice I've received, and this is something that you've leveraged yourself, is being in the right places. So being in those right networks. And for instance, and this is a completely different, far-fetched example, but if you've been watching the David Beckham documentary, scouts knew where to go to find good talent. So there are football clubs, there are feeder teams, and people know where to go. So if you're nowhere near there, and if you're just playing in your back garden, you're never going to get found by a scout in the football terms. Equally, if you're playing for a team that you know is synonymous with Manchester United or Chelsea or Arsenal, whoever, then that's a great place to be in. So it's putting yourself in the correct environments. And this is something I've done myself, is I've audited the environments that I'm placing myself in. And I've had to mentally say to myself, I need to level up to go into a new environment. And sometimes you feel that you've got that imposter syndrome at the start, but then you conform to that new group. One of the best programs I ever paid for years ago was a fantastic guy in America called Nick Robbins, who I think is excellent. Speak to him from time to time.
Mm.
Just going into that sphere of agency owners mentally allowed me to go and chase bigger clients. So I guess this is, to an extent, a shameless plug to myself, but finding a coaching program, whether that be my program or someone else's, because
Mm.
having the rub-off effect, rubbing shoulders with giants, so to speak, allows you to think you're worth more than what you are, which is, it's all about perception. Perception is reality. And
Yep.
with myself socializing with more successful entrepreneurs, that normalizes going out and chasing bigger clients for me. So it's probably not the answer people want to hear, but that's honestly the answer that I've come to, and what I've derived I wouldn't say the majority of my success from, because it comes down to you as a person, but
Mm.
having those people there to lean on has been second to none and invaluable.
Absolutely. No, I love that breakdown. And I think that's a really important thing. Your network, who you're speaking to, the kind of people that you're interacting with, the kind of businesses you're interacting with are going to go a long way in terms of making your sales process way more successful. So I think that's a great summary. Focus on the mindset. Look for people in your space that you think are really going to help you grow that side of your sales ability, and prospecting, making sure that you're selling solutions. These are all things that are going to help you get better at sales and make the process a lot easier, which is, it's one of the pain point of salespeople is actual selling. So you have to find those solutions within yourself too before you go out there to the market. I think that's a great way to round that up, Joe. Thanks for answering that question. If you have any questions like this, please go over to our subreddit and leave us some questions that we can answer on the podcast, or visit our podcast on Spotify and YouTube, Amazon Music if you want to hear more. We also have our email if you want to go send us some questions, podcast@grapplinggrowth.com. And that's it for now. I'm Erald Krasniqi, and this is
Joe Testouri.
And we thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Grappling Growth.
Thank
Cheers.
you, guys. Take care.